From well-developed, unique characters to a story that has you guessing and constantly surprising you, Final Fantasy VII Remake really has it all. Now, I know a lot of people go through the experience of the remake after going through the original. There's a lot of nostalgia and memories that go along with that. Maybe you don't like the things that changed, or maybe you love the story that deviates from the original. But what if you look at this game as it is? No original, no comparisons, just as a standalone new game. What does Final Fantasy VII Remake look like to someone who hasn't played the original? Has nothing to compare it to. How does it hold up? Are they as attached to the story and plot without the whole story and character arcs? This is exactly the experience I had at the beginning of 2022, when I picked up this game to play as my first ever video on my YouTube channel. Now, some people who know the whole story may be turned off by the fact that I haven't experienced the full story or character arcs, maybe deeming my opinions invalid since I've only played Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core at the time of this video. But I ask you to hear me out. Yes, I haven't experienced the whole story, but that's exactly what makes this such an interesting and unique perspective. And that is a huge reason I want to make this video in the first place, to share this experience and perspective of someone blind in the adventure. Someone who doesn't know plot points or all the characters or what drives them. Someone who only touched one Final Fantasy game before picking up the remake to play. Allow me to take the next short while to show you how this game holds up for someone like that. Let me show you why Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of the best games ever made. When this game released in April 2020, I almost bought it, but instead I got sucked into Nioh 2, which released about a month prior. Ever since Final Fantasy VII Remake released, I wanted to play it, but I always told myself, that'll be the first game I play on my gaming channel. So, cut to 20 months later when I finally made my YouTube channel, that's exactly what I did. When I booted up the game, got to the title screen and hit that record button, I remember feeling so many emotions. I felt like a kid on Christmas finally being able to play the remake, but I also had no idea what to expect. Yes, I heard a lot of people love Final Fantasy VII, but obviously I didn't want any spoilers, so I didn't know anything beyond that. The only characters I knew were the ones present in Kingdom Hearts, but even with those characters, I didn't necessarily know what Final Fantasy game they were from. Heck, I couldn't even remember Aerith's name. They weren't the reason I played Kingdom Hearts after all. They were just there, just side characters to me. So with that said, thoughts ran through my mind like, what if I don't like the game? What if I hate the gameplay? What if I never finish it? Needless to say, these thoughts were not a concern. I jumped into the game and I quickly realized what an absolute gem this game was. Right away with the first combat tutorial, I felt like a badass. I didn't do anything fancy, but it was just satisfying swinging this massive sword around with such finesse and ease as if it was made out of paper. We get introduced to characters like Jessie, Biggs, Wedge, and Barrett with all distinct personalities and extremely well voice acted. The environment and animation was beautiful, and I was especially impressed by the character animation. Each character has their own unique body language, aesthetic, and design to fit their personality. A great example of the deep and unique characters in the game is Barrett. You get introduced to Barrett right away in the game and he looks like your typical big tough guy at first. This is what I believed at first, and I didn't really like him because of it. I will admit I wasn't a fan of Barrett in my first playthrough, and you can probably see that in my Let's Play on my channel. But as you'll notice with basically every main character in this game, they are far deeper than what's on the surface. Before making this video, I recently replayed the game on hard mode and re-experienced everything again. With that said, I have a very different view on Barrett. Barrett is a tough guy, but he is far more than that. He is the rock of Avalanche, the foundation. Characters throughout the game may doubt themselves or what they're doing, but Barrett never wavers. Jessie blames herself for what they did in Chapter 1, but following blowing up the reactor, Barrett gives a speech to them. He says,
"But it's okay, 'cause I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders. Your fears, your worries, your concerns, and yes, your fees. Whatever your problem, I got you."
Later on, after Sector 7 falls, Barrett gets mad about what people are saying about Avalanche and clenches his fists, ready to speak his mind. Tifa stops him and says,
"No one will listen to us. There's no point in even trying."
Barrett immediately drops his fist of anger and turns to Tifa to comfort her and ease her mind without a second thought. He is true to himself and what he believes in till the end. He believes in his friends and will always be there to support them in any way he can. Not to even mention his soft and sweet side when it comes to his daughter Marlene. So yes, Barrett is a tough guy who gets angry, but he is far, far more than that. This is just one of the many examples of how deep and complex each character is in this game. The amount of depth in each character makes them feel more real, which in turn allows you to get invested in them and truly care about them. I have played too many games where characters will die and I felt nothing. I get that it's a sad moment, but I had no attachment. I can honestly say I've never full-on cried playing a video game. Before this one. When they're dropping the plate on Sector 7 and Biggs has his quote-unquote death scene, I got really teary-eyed, and I had to fight back the tears. Then when Jessie has her death scene immediately after, I lost it. I physically cried tears, which can be seen in episode. Those of you who have been on the channel know that it isn't easy to make me cry, but this story knows how to hit you in the feels. Jessie in her final moments talks about how she had it coming, and essentially that she believes she deserves it. All those people killed or hurt by the reactor explosion were her victims. This is hard in itself to watch because in her dying moments she's full of regret, blame, and pain. But as the player, it's even harder to watch, because we know it isn't her fault at all. I sat there watching it and wishing I could ease her mind and tell her it wasn't her fault. I wanted to take away the guilt that was bearing on her conscience, but alas, I'm only a spectator. I felt helpless. And as sad as that sounds, the game making me feel that way is a testament to the incredibly well-written characters and story. Through to the end, even in her dying moments, Jessie stayed true to herself. She was always a character that was strong and didn't want to appear weak. She always knew how to lighten the mood throughout the game with her quick wit and bubbly personality. She really brought a lot of laughs and joy to the group as well as me, the player. Even in her dying moments, she was making me crack a smile through my sorrow, which honestly made it harder to deal with the sadness and pain of the situation. She even made quick-witted comments to Tifa as Tifa starts crying over her. This not only shows the impact Jessie has on the player, but the characters around her too. The hardy Cloud even had emotions written on his immovable expression and with the clenching of his fist. Even if he didn't cry, you knew he really felt something. The takeaway here is that if I didn't care about these characters, yeah, the moment would still be sad, but I definitely wouldn't have cried. The most I've ever done before this game was get teary-eyed. Biggs and Jessie aren't even main characters at the end of the day. If they can make me care that much about side characters, how do you think I would be with a main character? It takes absolutely incredible writing, animation, and storytelling to achieve that. I can honestly say I don't have a problem with any character at all. Even when there are personality traits that I don't like, I want that. It makes the characters have so much more complexity. Barrett is a great example. I hate his militant and forceful aspects to his personality. There are many points in the story where he displays that eagerness to fight and being aggressive. But even though I don't like it, I unironically love that he is like that. It provides that depth that I'm talking about with these characters. Because he has those traits about him, his caring, protective, and most importantly his fatherly side stands out so much more. The contrast between these traits just makes him so much more complex. So yeah, I love every single character in this game. Even when I hate their personality traits, they are still just so well written. Their bad traits either make their good traits stand out more, give them opportunity to grow, and or brings out better traits and characters they interact with. Of all the characters, it shouldn't be surprising that the main character, Cloud, has the most interesting arc. He is the character you are with the whole game, and so you join him in all his experiences. Cloud and the other characters in this game aren't only great on their own, but in their relationships with one another as well. And you're able to see characters grow together, like Cloud with Tifa, Aerith, or Barrett. With that said, a huge focus on this retrospective is going to be on Cloud due to the fact that everything circles back to him. He has interactions with so many characters, is in all aspects of the story, and has so much growth, and arguably the most growth, throughout the whole game. By following Cloud's journey and experiences, we'll be able to see so much with other characters, the world, and the story direction. I would argue it's the reason why Cloud is the perfect fit for the role of main character throughout the game. Some might even say one of the best main characters ever. At the beginning of the game, Cloud is introduced as simply a mercenary that Avalanche hired, presumably because Tifa knew him. Though they know each other, they have not seen or talked to one another in 5 years. Based on interaction that they have throughout the beginning of the game, you can tell that the years they were apart forced them to grow separately. The first interaction we see of them is Cloud giving a flower to Tifa, to which her response is,
How sweet. When did you get so thoughtful?
clearly showing that things aren't going to be exactly how they remember it 5 years ago. And how could it? As Cloud states, a lot can change in 5 years. And a lot did. Right away, it's clear that though these characters knew one another, they don't know who they are now. Jump to when Cloud and Tifa are running around Sector 7, there's a point when you have to save Johnny from Shinra troops. When Tifa tells Cloud that Johnny is a talker, implying that he will spill secrets about Avalanche, Cloud winds up his sword, ready to shut him up for good. Tifa sees this and immediately stops him, and Johnny runs away. Cloud then looks at the Shinra troops now on the ground and says,
And them?
implying killing them.
No more. Cloud. You're scaring me.
This is an extremely powerful line. It says a lot about Tifa's feelings, as well as illustrating to her how much Cloud really has changed in the last 5 years. This was clearly a realization moment for Tifa. The fact that he would cut someone down in cold blood goes against everything she stands for and who she is. It is seen numerous times throughout the game how unanimously compassionate she is. Whether it is her friend, a risk to Avalanche like Johnny, a topside Shinra reporter, or even a Shinra trooper. Tifa clearly values life highly, and to see Cloud ready to so easily dispose of it without hesitation, no wonder it scares her. When it comes to Cloud's purpose and drive, I don't know he really had one at this point in the game. It was really just about working, making a living, and surviving. And I think that's important to acknowledge that. By the end of the game, it is clearly not as objective anymore. So what changed? I think the start of it was when he went topside with Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. He has a flashback scene of him when he was younger talking with Tifa in the village where they grew up. He tells her that he's going to Midgar, and Tifa responds with a bit of disappointment in her voice, saying that,
Should have figured. All the guys are leaving.
Cloud then pipes up to set himself apart from these other guys, saying,
I'm gonna be a soldier. The best of the best. Like Sephiroth.
This leads Tifa to ask Cloud to promise her something.
Just promise me one thing. When we're older, and you're a famous soldier, if I'm ever trapped or in trouble, promise you'll come and save me.
Huh?
That's what heroes do. They save people. Please? Just once. Come on, promise me.
Fine. I promise.
This memory gave Cloud a new purpose, beyond just making a living. Tifa confided in him earlier in the game at the bar that she felt trapped with the way they were blowing up the reactors. Cloud remembering this doesn't want her to feel trapped and alone. Someone he cares about needs him, and he's going to be there for her. After the mission, Tifa comes to his room asking him if he'll stick around for a while, to which Cloud tells her,
Well, seems this old friend of mine's in a tight spot. Long time ago I said I'd be there for her. Made a promise. So...
He even goes as far as offering to talk and listen to her, like a true friend. I think this is a massive moment for Cloud, and it is something that we see develop more throughout the game with various characters. He is clearly someone who's not good at expressing emotions or being particularly comforting. So seeing Cloud trying to be there for his friend in that way means a great deal coming from him. I think this speaks a lot about Tifa, and more specifically Cloud's connection with Tifa. Even though Cloud may not come out and say it, to me, Cloud's action of being there for Tifa shows his emotion through action. Emotion through action is a theme we'll see with Cloud throughout the game. It is one of the best ways to describe him in my opinion. Jumping ahead to Chapter 8, Cloud falls from the reactor and wakes up in Aerith's church in a bed of flowers. At the time of my first playthrough, I hadn't played Crisis Core, but when I played the game again, after playing Crisis Core, boy are the parallels apparent. In Crisis Core, Aerith was more reserved to me. She wasn't nearly as forward as she is in the remake. It's blatantly obvious to me that she took after Zack, which is incredibly sweet to me. Both in the remake and Crisis Core, Cloud and Zack fell through the roof into a bed of flowers. Aerith says,
Hello?
to wake each of them up out of their unconsciousness. Zack puts up an offer of one date after he falls through the roof. Aerith offers a date as payment to Cloud for bodyguard work. Aerith clearly held the confidence that Zack had when interacting with Cloud, while Cloud has the more reserved demeanor that Aerith showed in Crisis Core. I appreciate this so much. I enjoyed the sequence a lot on my first playthrough, But on subsequent, I had even greater appreciation for it on top of that. I think you could see what I will refer to as the Zack influence in her personality throughout this game. It is clear to me how much Zack impacted Aerith when comparing Crisis Core Aerith to Remake Aerith, and I adore that growth. Something we see constantly between Aerith and Cloud throughout their one-on-one time is Aerith reading Cloud like a book. She understands his personality so well, and seeing her interact with him is so fluid. What I mean by that is, no matter what Cloud does, Aerith is able to adapt and respond immediately, almost like she was ready for it. There are multiple instances where Cloud is hesitating or thinking something, and Aerith just understands him. She says or responds to exactly what he's thinking. This was incredibly enjoyable to see. Watching Aerith get Cloud out of the comfort zone and seeing how Cloud responds was a massive part of his time spent with Aerith in this part of the game. It's what provided him so much growth and a huge reason why he is who he is by the end of the game. Aerith was also kind of bossy towards Cloud, which I have mixed feelings about, but it did get Cloud out of his comfort zone. The reason why I like it is because she forced him into situations he wouldn't have been in otherwise, and we got to see how he reacted and grew from those experiences. On the other hand, I think a lot of us can relate to having someone who puts you in situations like that, and I could really feel for Cloud here. Especially the quantity of situations Cloud found himself in due to Aerith. It was a weird combination of me enjoying Cloud's reactions, but then also relating to Cloud and having a bit of irritation. Obviously, at the end of the day, this was a positive thing for Cloud, so it all worked out. Probably my favorite scene between Cloud and Aerith is when you finish up all the quests in Sectors 5 after Aerith goes to talk to the flowers. Cloud then asks what the flowers said. She starts to tell Cloud about what she thinks the flowers are saying, but ultimately refrains since Cloud wouldn't believe her. Cloud then does what you probably would expect him to do and says,
Probably not.
What I didn't expect was him to stop, turn around, and say,
Tell me anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And you can see how surprised Aerith was as well by her expression and tone of voice. Not only that, but it was impossible to miss the pure joy that she had that Cloud would even just be there to listen to her. I think this is a huge callback as well to what Cloud learned with Tifa back in Sector 7 and listening to her. It is amazing to see how the writers didn't just make it a one and done thing and carried it through to truly make it a trait learned by Cloud. It isn't the last time we see that either, and I love that. Anyways, the scene continues and Aerith explains what she thinks the flowers are trying to tell her. She talks about taking a final step where they won't be able to hear them. She then concludes with saying she should just give up since it's what she does best. Cloud pipes up at this then, saying,
Could have fooled me. From what I've seen, you're no quitter.
This is right in line with what me as a player felt. She didn't seem like a quitter at all. The fact that he was able to offer words of encouragement and ease her mind was big for him. Better yet was what happened after they started to set off back to Aerith's house. Cloud turns to the flowers and says,
Learn to talk to her.
I think this scene was awesome and showed a lot of character for Aerith and Cloud both. It also represented that Cloud did learn from past experiences like with Tifa, which is a true mark of progression. A scene that I found to be interesting is one that Cloud has when he stays the night at Aerith's place. Cloud has a dream of what I presume to be his mom, Claudia. She talks about finding an older and more mature girl to keep him on the straight and narrow. The most logical implication of this is that the girl his mom is talking about is supposed to be relating to Aerith. I have questioned if this clip is a memory or just a dream, but due to continuity issues I see, I have to assume it's just a dream. Which this then makes me question the subconscious of Cloud a bit. The implication I get is that he's starting to get feelings for Aerith then. I'm not sure how I feel about that, mainly due to the fact that Cloud doesn't seem the type to be so quick to grow feelings. They have literally known each other for less than a day. But perhaps this is more to push plot later in that direction, and this is just the writer sparking a fire. This game does an amazing job developing characters and story, and what really makes it shine is the ability to have fun with those things. Chapter 9 of the game that has our main characters, including Cloud, dress up in dresses is phenomenal. It was absolutely hilarious seeing Cloud in a dress, and especially seeing all the reactions to Cloud wearing it. If you really make the most of Cloud in a dress and talk to people, you can see some interesting reactions. Chadley was by far my favorite, and I still quote to this day.
Forgive me, miss.
Who is
the
she?
way you're staring
I need
at
to learn
me is
everything
rather...
about her.
Oh goodness! I'm experiencing an emotional response.
Everything about it was just pure fun, and at the end of the day, that is what games are supposed to be. Watching Cloud dance on stage was absolutely hilarious, especially if you didn't do well at the minigame like me.
Well, you tried.
The transformation process of Cloud and then playing as Aerith to watch him walk out of the Honeybee Inn with just flush with embarrassment was pure gold. Not to mention when Corneo picks Cloud and brings him to his room. Cloud does the thing that we all wanted to do and just straight round kicks the shit out of Corneo. This game just knows how to have a great time and can balance it all so well on top of maintaining phenomenal characters and telling a compelling story. You might have noticed that most of this retrospective is character oriented so far, and there's a reason for that. Up until you get to chapter 10, I would say the story is pretty much just establishing Avalanche versus Shinra. This is done through voice lines of main characters, civilians in the slums or topside, news broadcasts, quick scenes of Shinra figureheads, blowing up reactors, etc. Now, what I think the larger goal at hand with the first 9 chapters is character development. As someone who didn't know these characters at all going into the game, this was really appreciated. If you knew the original, you might know their personalities and character qualities they have, regardless of what the game portrayed. But me, I had no expectations for the characters, nothing to attach me to them. If it wasn't for the game putting so much focus on the characters in the first half of the game, I wouldn't have felt as attached. Therefore, story beats and character revelations wouldn't have made as much of an impact. As a gamer and as someone who wants to dive headfirst into the story I experienced, this approach on the game was flawless to me. In order for me to have a horse in the race, I need to have someone or people I am rooting for. Otherwise, do I really care what the outcome is on the story? So, with the foundation of established characters behind me, the story can truly start. And boy, did it ever. Though the story, I would say, has truly begun, it is still more of the prelude, if you will, to the big event. Before falling into the sewers, Don Corneo talks about Shinra dropping the plate on Sector 7. This causes great distress in the group about whether or not he's telling the truth, and especially Tifa. On multiple occasions throughout the sewers, we see Tifa questioning if Corneo is telling the truth. But no matter how many times she thought about it or how many times Cloud or Aerith reassures her, she can't shake the thought. Her incessant worrying and bringing up whether or not Corneo was lying was repeated so many times. She honestly brought it up so much to the point where I actually was starting to get annoyed by it. And I actually unironically loved that. It just really solidified how truly terrified she is by the idea of it. And you can imagine why. From the bar to her friends to the people of Sector 7, topside and slums, she would lose so much. I talked earlier about how unanimously compassionate she is towards anyone. So can you imagine how she felt when she finds out about a possibility of dropping a plate full of people on 50,000 more people down below? For someone as compassionate as Tifa, this is enough to break you. From my perspective playing the game for the first time, I found it a bit annoying. And now, it just has incredible impact and says so much about her character. I think it would be an injustice to her and her character to have it any other way. As someone who didn't play the original, I didn't know what was going to happen myself. I remember speculating with Tifa about whether or not he was telling the truth, or if Shinra was actually that ruthless to kill their own people on that scale. In the end, I came to the conclusion that they would try to drop the plate, but Cloud and friends would stop them before it happened. This is a fictional game where you can stop things with half a second to spare and have a happy ending. Oh, how wrong I was. Little did I know, this isn't just some Hallmark movie. This wouldn't be a true retrospective if I wasn't honest about what I don't like about the game as well. Though I think this is one of the best games ever made, no game is perfect. There are a couple portions of the game that aren't as strong in my opinion. The Haunted Graveyard is one of those portions. It's probably my second least favorite part of the game, only second to the Sun Lamp portion of the game in Chapter 6. The problem with Chapter 6 is nothing happens. You're essentially going from point A to B. The environment isn't visually interesting at all. There's a bit of backtracking when going between lamps, and the characters don't get more developed. You can cut that whole part out and would have lost nothing. You turn off the sun lamp and Tifa worries about the people below, but nothing comes of it. Nothing is changed or gained. When it comes to the Haunted Graveyard in Chapter 11, aside from getting confirmation they are dropping the plate, which added more urgency and emotion, especially to Tifa, this area didn't propel anything. With that said, it was definitely still better than Chapter 6. This area was a more unique idea that gave visual appeal, and the characters did have some interesting lines and cutscenes for the scary situation they were in. All in all though, this was not the greatest area, with enemies and bosses I just found annoying to fight. You gain a bit of personality with the characters, mainly Aerith and Tifa, but nothing much that transcends Chapter 11, or wasn't previously established. Oh boy, are we getting into the good story plot now. Chapter 12. This is the chapter where all hell breaks loose. Roses are red, cactuses are prickly, and holy shit does this escalate quickly. We finally get to the pillar after a trip through the haunted platform 9 3/4. This part of the game is heavy. Very heavy. As Cloud works his way up the tower, he faces the loss of people he cares about. Since I already touched on that earlier in this video, I'm going to gloss over some of the details of that loss, but not all of it. There's an aspect of Jessie's that I refrained from mentioning earlier. When Jessie closes her eyes for the last time and Tifa through her tears sees Jessie is gone, Tifa starts to bawl. This is a living hell for Tifa. And on top of that, things could get worse, and they could lose more than just Jessie and Biggs. Cloud sees and hears Tifa's sorrow intensify and lets out a almost as if he was trying to comfort her, but no words past that escape. He proceeds to look at his hand and clench it into a fist. As the camera pans up, you see Cloud's face with almost a mix of anger and sorrow, uncertain what to feel or how to express it. I found this part extremely emotional and very interesting to see Cloud handling loss as well as Tifa in pain on top of that. At the end of the scene, does he actually comfort Tifa? No, but it doesn't mean he didn't want to. It was apparent to me based on his actions and body language that he wanted to reach out to Tifa and comfort her. He wanted to speak the words that would lift her spirit. He wanted to be there for her like he promised back when they were kids, but he doesn't know how. Not only that, but she wasn't the only one in pain, was she? Cloud too was feeling the loss of Jessie. She meant something to him and was his friend. How was he to control his own emotions and take on that of another's? So he does what he does best. He pushes his emotions down and clenches his fist ready for a fight. Not just as a mercenary though, but as a soldier for vengeance. Not just for what was done to his friends he lost, but for the ones that are still there, like Tifa, who are sharing in his pain. At the top of the pillar, the following scene plays out.
Cloud!
Tifa!
What do we do?
Now hear me out, but this was always really lame to me when it comes to the execution here. I know this is incredibly minor, and at the end of the day, it means literally nothing, but it just always stood out to me when everything else in this game is so beautifully done. I think the meaning we are supposed to gain from this is that Cloud was choosing to help his friend over running after the enemy who just solidified the fate of the entire Sector 7, topside and slums. However, Tifa calling for Cloud and then immediately standing up on her own following the scene was probably the lamest thing I saw in this entire game. I'm not blaming Tifa for this. This is clearly just a very minor writing issue, but I wanted to point it out. Instead of Tifa calling for Cloud, make her unconscious. Cloud, with his eyes set on Rude, charges at him, and Rude does the same. As Rude slides past Cloud, Cloud turns and faces him again. As he's turning around, he catches a glimpse of Tifa's body lying motionless next to the control console. He is then faced with the decision: run after the man who sealed the fate of Sector 7 and achieve vengeance, or make sure his friend is alright. Cloud, who faced so much loss already, doesn't want to lose another friend, and so he chooses Tifa. She then wakes up after he props her up on his leg. As she regains consciousness, she gets a glimpse of the screen that says separation initiated, and she finds the energy to get back up to see what she can do. Again, not a big deal, I know, but I just wanted to provide my thoughts and input there. I think it's just a more meaningful interaction and says a lot about Cloud and its growth. With the plate on a countdown to collapse, Cloud starts to run to find a way out. As he's running, he sees Tifa sitting there at the edge of the platform looking out at the Sector 7 slums for the last time. She is lost in her mind, knowing that there's nothing she can do, and feeling powerless. This is a person full of compassion and care for other people, and yet She couldn't do anything in the end to save tens of thousands of people doomed to die. For someone as caring and selfless as Tifa, nothing is worse than this. It wasn't just people in the city either. It was her neighbors, friends, and even her home. And this feeling and situation is all too familiar to Tifa. She saw her hometown burn and family and friends perish. It's no wonder she completely lost herself, overcome by the trauma and pain of the current situation as well as the past. If it wasn't for Cloud grabbing her and pulling her to safety, I don't think she would have made it out of there. She would have been stuck there, frozen in fear and immense sorrow. Chapter 13. This can be summarized with one word: depressing. And that is about what you would expect after what happened in the previous chapter. Immediately off the bat, you see our main characters waking up in the flaming hellscape ruins of what was Sector 7. And I think Barret sets the mood perfectly for what not only the characters are feeling in the game, but us as a player as well.
God damn you! God damn you all! Marlene.
Let me just say this right away. This part gives me shivers every single time, without fail. The voice actor of Barret did an absolutely astounding and impeccable job delivering these lines, as well as having perfect emotions attached behind those words. This is incredibly powerful. If you remember back to earlier in this retrospective, I referred to Barret as the rock or foundation of the group. Here we have our foundation shaking and trembling, and if our foundation is unstable, the rest comes crumbling down after. So seeing Barret, our constant tough guy, getting emotional had a heavy impact on the other characters, which I think you can see on Tifa and Cloud's face. And not only are the characters affected in game, but the player as well. At least that was true for me. It came from such a genuine place. Not to mention, I was feeling the same way. I was calling out to the characters he was, and felt the same way he did. Every punch against the wall was felt in the heart of the player, each successive hit making your heart sink further into your stomach, almost literally beating it into you as a reminder of everything that happened and everything that was lost. I felt an immense sense of failure and loss. The game wrapped me in so well that I felt like I had lost my home and I lost my friends. But nothing screams defeat like this line from Tifa.
It was us. We did this.
This line says so much in so little. Tifa never wanted to blow up the reactors and confided in Cloud that she felt trapped by it. She always disagreed with that method, but was constantly outvoted. And now, she believed that the thing that she already regretted doing and the thing that she never wanted to do destroyed everything she built up and worked for. Destroyed her home, her friends, and thousands of innocent people who our compassionate protagonist would guard with her life. Everything she fought for, destroyed in minutes. And who did she blame? Herself. She isn't going to blame Shinra when this whole time she thought what Avalanche was doing was wrong. Maybe what Shinra is doing wasn't right, but she never believed blowing up the reactors was right either. And she played along with Avalanche schemes she disagreed with, and now she reaps the ultimate reward: guilt, blame, and regret. Luckily, Barret, hearing these words, realizes his friends that he supports are collapsing, and the Foundation returns. He tells her that she can't think like that. Perhaps knowing that Tifa didn't agree with the bombings of the reactor, he says,
Whatever came before it was Shinra that pulled the trigger today.
Meaning, it doesn't matter what they did before. No matter what was done, Shinra made this decision. Avalanche blew up a couple reactors, but nothing they did would force them to drop an entire plate, killing tens of thousands. That was all Shinra's choice. Jumping a little bit ahead to the beginning of Chapter 14, we can see some more very emotional scenes. There are 3 different scenes you can get at the beginning of Chapter 14, depending on various criteria. The one that I got in my first playthrough is Tifa. The scene with Tifa is very good, and there's a lot to unpack with it. First off, as is true for all 3 scene options, Cloud hears someone walking around and gets up to check it out. His search leads him outside, where he will see one of the 3 other main characters, which in this case is Tifa. Cloud approaches Tifa and starts up conversation asking if she can't sleep. This ends up leading to Tifa bringing up the flower Cloud gave her and asking if it was from Aerith. The thing I couldn't figure out with this scene was if the fact that Cloud received the flower from Aerith and gave it to Tifa diminished its value in Tifa's eyes. She says,
I knew there was something weird going on. You buying flowers?
There was a scene at the beginning of chapter 10 when they fall into the sewers that I want to draw attention to briefly. If you wake up Tifa before Aerith, Tifa asks,
How do you 2 know each other?
I saved her. She saved me. Round and round it goes.
And that's all there is to it. Sure there isn't something else going on?
She sounded a little inquisitive, trying to figure out if they were a thing, or perhaps you could interpret that as her being jealous. So when it comes to this flower scene, I found myself trying to figure out how Tifa felt about that. Was she disappointed he got it from Aerith and didn't just get it for her? Does she not care and was simply just asking a question? She then continues to say,
They symbolize reunion, believe it or not. I was curious, so I looked it up.
which is very befitting for Tifa to receive from Cloud as they just reunited after 5 years. Which is also why I think the flower is more meant for Tifa. At the end of the day, it was Cloud's choice to give the flower to Tifa. He didn't have to. Yes, Tifa asked about it, but it was his decision. The flower clearly meant a lot to Tifa. After all, she looked up the meaning of the flower. Perhaps because she wanted to know how Cloud felt about her, or if it meant anything at all. Or maybe again it was just curiosity. She also valued the flower highly because she talks about trying to keep it alive as long as she could. So I'm led to believe that this meant a lot to Tifa. I would like to believe that it remained that way even after finding out it was from Aerith. At the very least, I would think that she still values it highly for the symbolism regardless of how it was acquired. I would be interested to hear what you think in the comments, without spoilers from the original, in case anything happened there. Perhaps it's just me trying to figure out what side of the Cloud and Tifa or Cloud and Aerith debate the game is on, because at the end of the day, that is what's canon. I think as someone who has only played the remake and Crisis Core, it's hard for me to see Aerith with anyone other than Zack at this point. So with Zack appearing to be alive at the end of the game, I am led to believe Aerith is kind of taken. And I think I have some bias with that said, but I will say I'm trying to go into this retrospective without the bias between the two. Anyways, that tangent aside, after Tifa talks about keeping the flower alive, we see why she's awake and couldn't sleep. Her voice starts to shake as she says,
I tried to keep it alive as long as I could. But now, it's dead and buried. Like the bar, our home, and everything else.
This is a perfect window into Tifa's thoughts and mind. Up until this point, Tifa had to be strong to keep moving from what happened in Sector 7. She had no time to grieve. She had to be strong and put up a front since they had other things to worry about, like finding Wedge and Marlene. This is the first time since the plate fell that she has cried. The first time she's able to feel and let it out. She lost her home, the bar, her friends, and everything else. She basically has to start over. And then when she says,
They took everything from us. Again.
that is when it hit me head on in the feels. This wasn't the first time she experienced this. She lost her home, her father, and everything else back then too, and had to move on to start anew. That had to be the hardest point in her life. And now she finds herself doing it again. But who better to share this moment with than Cloud, who also experienced that exact same thing, since they are from the same village and he lost his mom. This is something they can both relate to, and they can help shoulder each other's burden. This was an absolutely touching moment. Tifa is absolutely in shambles, with everything I have described up to this point compounded to this one moment. All that pain, fear, regret, and pure sorrow snowball affected into this moment. There's one last thing I want to hit on, so I'm going to show the rest of the scene. Really pay attention to Cloud here.
Like the bar, our home, and everything else. They took everything from us. Again. Cloud.
Huh?
Cloud, you're hurting me. It's stupid. I know that crying's a waste of time.
That's not true.
Thank you.
Cloud's face says it all. You see the surprise on his face when Tifa puts her head against him. The eyes change when Tifa says, again, making him remember what happened to their village, or perhaps seeing someone who is dealing with the same pain he has. That pain has been evident throughout the game with all the flashback and hallucination scenes we have seen. If there's anyone who can understand her pain and what she's going through, it's him. You can see in his eyes the pain that he is suppressing to stay strong as his eyes and face twitch. And maybe he also felt less alone in that pain, and like he had someone who could understand somewhat what he is feeling as well. But of course, no matter what the reason is, our stone-faced Cloud would never say anything about it, regardless of how it's eating him up inside. As Tifa starts to bawl, and the camera zooms in on his face, you can see more of that hidden emotion start to seep out of his eyes and facial expressions. You can see his arms start to rise slightly off his sides. He sees that she's in pain, and his body is reacting. But more importantly, he feels she is in pain, and his mind is reacting. Perhaps it's just the animation, but his eyes look like they glisten with the tears he's holding back. Finally, the emotions inside Cloud take control, perhaps for the first time in the entire game, and he hugs her. As he wraps his arms around her, you see his head point downward, and his eyes look to the ground, showing that it isn't just an act or just courtesy, but genuine, and he doesn't let go. With Cloud's arms now around Tifa in a comforting embrace, Tifa's cries start to lessen till they stop altogether. He gets so lost in the hug that when Tifa says his name, he appears to snap back to reality with an audible, huh? Like someone taking out a thought. Not only that, but with his emotions in control during the hug, he didn't even realize how tight he was holding Tifa. When she says he's hurting her, he backs off immediately. When Tifa wipes the tears from her eyes and says she knows crying is a waste of time, Cloud rejects that thought. By doing that, he essentially validates her emotions. This was a massive moment for Cloud. Not only did his emotions truly come through and genuinely express himself, but he shows yet again that he kept his promise to Tifa. He is truly being there for her and listening to her without just going through the motions. This is probably my favorite scene in the entire game because there are so many different emotions here and incredible character development. The other scene I want to talk about is the Aerith scene. I got this scene when I replayed the game on hard mode. This scene is the main reason I think anyone who didn't play the original and gets this cutscene are going to ship Cloud and Aerith. There are a lot of fairly direct lines in here. However, at the same time, there are lines that just straight up say it can't happen. Aerith catches on to the fact that Cloud is worried about her, to which Cloud responds so quick and maybe more genuine than he said anything else in the game with,
Of course I am.
I will admit, this scene is extremely confusing to me, and I think it has to do with the fact that I don't know the whole story yet. So it's really confusing when she says this.
I'm glad I met you, Cloud. I really am. I'm grateful for all the words we've shared, for all the moments and the memories. You've made me more happy than you know. And I'll always cherish what you've given me.
She immediately follows it up with,
But whatever happens, you can't fall in love with me. Even if you think you have, it's not real.
What does that even mean? Is there some ancient aura that makes people fall in love with her? Is it Cloud's Mako in his veins that resonate with someone like Aerith, who is an ancient, and it causes him to be drawn to her? These are just my speculations, and I'm definitely looking forward to understanding more as they get into Rebirth, which is set to release very soon. The thing that is so confusing is that Cloud indirectly acknowledges his feelings for her in confirming that to the audience. And then the game takes the hopes of all the Aerith shippers out there and takes a massive shit on it. It says it's nope on a rope and it can't happen. Whether this could be a story of overcoming odds, I guess we'll see. But I am so torn by this scene. It really makes it feel like Cloud wants to be with Aerith, which almost feels like no ship exists in the end. Cloud will be thinking about Aerith, and therefore nothing will happen with Tifa. And what that means is nobody wins, and everybody loses, and that kinda sucks. Even if the side I'm rooting for doesn't win, I would at least want one side of the fanbase to be happy, rather than nobody. But this is all just speculation. For all I know, Cloud has more than just platonic feelings for Tifa too, and this rejection from Aerith will give him only one love interest. The other problem is Zack is alive, and that's gonna be hella awkward if Cloud has feelings for his buddy's girl. Anyways, I digress. The scene ends with Cloud wanting to have a say in whether or not he can fall in love with her. Again, solidifying to me that he has feelings for her. The scene is a sweet one and really dives into the romantic feelings for Cloud. Where Tifa's scene was emotional in a grief, pain, and sorrow kind of way, Aerith's scene is emotional in more of a rejected, romantic way. Something I specifically want to mention about this scene is Cloud feeling quote-unquote in love with Aerith very quickly. He's known her for I think 2 days in game. This seems extremely odd to me because Cloud does not seem the type to fall to emotions so easily. With that said, perhaps the not real line Aerith dropped in us would lend some insight into this. All in all, very interesting scene, and I think it's important to acknowledge these feelings from Cloud and even Aerith here. Let's get past all the sad emotions now and move on to the chapter where Barrett, Cloud, and Tifa get to Shinra headquarters. As someone who's completely new to this game, this was a very important chapter for understanding the game, story, and world of Final Fantasy VII. Before we get to that though, I just want to point out a couple things I found interesting and fun in this chapter. Toward the beginning of the chapter, our characters find themselves in the lobby of the Shinra building. Before they can progress any further, they need a keycard. So for the first time in the game, we actually get to play as Tifa as we run around the lobby. As we play as Tifa, we get to experience a fairly in-depth parkour portion. There were minor parkour sections like this, such as in Sector 5 Church with Aerith, but not as the main focus of gameplay like it was here. I think it worked well despite it being a different type of gameplay. I also think, however, if parkour was done more outside of these locations, it would be annoying. It's a bit slow in its controls and doesn't give a super satisfying "I did it" or awesome vibes like an old school Assassin's Creed game might. But for this short segment and getting to play as Tifa, it was unique and fun. The main reason I want to talk about this section isn't the parkour though, it is the fact that we're able to control someone other than Cloud. Now, this is not the first time we do this. Up to this point, we have played as Aerith in a couple locations and played as Barrett in the underground Shinra base. But this was the point where we officially played as all the main protagonists outside of combat. In combat, you're freely able to play and control any character you want whenever you want, provided they're in your party. But as far as outside of combat, besides these brief portions, we only play as Cloud and cannot change this. They programmed each character to be able to be controlled outside of combat, and it would have been awesome to be able to pick which character you control outside of combat as well. This is more like a wishlist item, I would say, as we move into games like Rebirth. I get that it's Cloud's story, so I would never be mad or anything if we can't play as other characters, but I would personally enjoy the customizability. Now, for what is probably one of the funniest moments in the game, perhaps only bested by the dress sequence in Sector 6. And of course, I'm talking about the glorious stairs. This was absolutely, positively, an amazing addition to the game. This sequence could have totally just been developed as a SpongeBob 30 minutes later type thing, or time jump of sorts. But the devs excelled at making this an incredibly memorable and fun experience. You literally run up 59 floors that our main characters have to. And I can legitimately say I felt as close to exhausted running up those stairs as you can without having to actually do it yourself. And that is mainly because I could see how much the characters were struggling and could feel and understand their struggle. That is the perfect design to make the player feel what the characters are going through. Some people might complain that it takes too long or it's boring. I would argue I love that it takes as long as it does. It really puts you in the shoes of the characters and gives you a sense of accomplishment and appreciation for what they had to do. It is so easy to lose the appreciation of what the character had to go through if the game cuts from when you leave the first floor straight to the 59th floor when they are out of breath. Yeah, you can still do a funny gag from the characters on the top, but you lose the journey and the struggle they took to get there. Not to mention the devs didn't make it just a boring experience. They had so many fun lines from the characters, and especially Barrett the whole way up. They kept it entertaining despite it being a boring, tedious task at face value. I unironically loved this running upstairs portion, and I never thought I would say that about going upstairs. Ever. Never have I looked at a video game trailer or seen a tall building and said to myself, I really hope the game devs let me physically run up 59 floors. But man am I happy they did. In my hard mode playthrough, I took the elevator to see the difference in experience, and it just isn't the same. You get a quick cutscene of them on the elevator and then you're done. It's nice that the game devs provide this option though, especially since the stairs do take a long time to do. But I highly recommend the stairs to any new players because it's such a wonderful experience to do at least once. On subsequent playthroughs, no problem, take the elevator. I just really enjoyed this portion and had to give some acknowledgement to it. With this being my introduction into Final Fantasy VII, the museum section of the chapter absolutely fascinated me. It was great at further building the world and also developing Shinra from a perspective outside of Avalanche. It was more of what Shinra looks like to a citizen perspective. Hearing about the different divisions of Shinra and seeing board members and what they do helped me better understand who Shinra is and what they do more. The part that was so incredibly beautiful about it though was the Cosmos Theater. The fully rendered cutscenes here were drop-dead gorgeous and the cinematography breathtaking to boot. Not to mention I was finally learning about who the Ancients are and what happened to them. Up to this point I had no idea what they were, aside from Aerith is presumed to be the last living Ancient. But seeing the beautiful green and nature-filled world was also an amazing contrast to the wasteland and industrial look that is Midgar. I think that really spoke volumes as to what the Promised Land is perceived as for Shinra. It's no wonder they want it so badly when they perceive it as essentially a paradise filled with Mako. I have no idea if the Promised Land is real, but for whatever reason, I feel like it isn't. Or at least not what Shinra expects it to be. I know the answer is probably out there from the original, but I just have to wait patiently and theorize in the meantime. Then comes the part that really trips me up as a newcomer into Final Fantasy VII, and that is Sephiroth. We get a sequence at the end of the cinematic of the sky burning and Midgar getting torn apart, and Sephiroth killing Barrett and Tifa. I genuinely have no idea what to make of this. Let me just tell you as a noob to the lore, Sephiroth in this game is an enigma. I have no idea what drives that man. Crisis Core gave me a bit more insight into him, but even that didn't tell me as much as I would like. I will talk a bit more about him later when he becomes more relevant, but just wanted to share how utterly confused I am by all this, and presumably that is the point. We get a scene following that cinematic of Colonel Mustard with his tea, who is so far off my radar, I physically couldn't remember his name when writing this, hence calling him Colonel Mustard. After looking it up, this man's name is Palmer, and he is probably the least important and most forgettable character we meet. I kinda hope he gets more value because man is he useless at this point. Anyways, he spills his tea because he sees what we can assume with later context to be Sephiroth. Again, I'm so confused by Sephiroth. I think it's supposed to be this way. All the PTSD-like hallucinations that Cloud has throughout the games regarding him, I struggle to make heads or tails with them. What is actually of value with those hallucinations? Is there truth in them? Are certain ones memories, or are they all just made up? I have so many questions, and I guess I have to wait till Rebirth in Part 3 to get my answers. In Chapter 17, our characters find themselves in Hojo's laboratory and find Jenova. Cloud grabs his head in pain at the name, and thus starts what you think is another hallucination. This is the part of the story where we finally get to legitimately meet Sephiroth outside of Cloud's hallucination. And it was very impactful on our characters, especially Cloud. We have seen Cloud basically frozen with fear and perhaps pain when he sees the hallucinations of Sephiroth in the past. This time, however, he actually manages to get a hold of himself, which I think says a lot about his growth. He was actually ready to face him. Or should I say he thinks he's ready to face him. Cloud gets on the offensive and Sephiroth quickly puts him in his place and yeets that boy down a hole. As someone going in blind, this was my introduction to Sephiroth. and it portrayed him as someone who was very powerful. When you see him in the scene, he looks like he is basically yawning while he cuts the bridge and throws Cloud down the hole, all while he's only using one hand. Absolute badass. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't grimace, he doesn't emote, and he just looks unfazed. This told me that he is not to be taken lightly. I chose to skip a scene at the beginning of chapter 17 because I wanted to jump back to it after meeting Sephiroth. When Cloud wakes up from blacking out from yet another hallucination, we get to hear more of the story of Aerith and Ancients. There is one part in particular I want to focus on though, and that is when Aerith says this.
The Shinra Electric Power Company isn't the real enemy. It started with them, sure, but I promise you, there's a much bigger threat. I just want to do everything in my power to help. All of you. And the planet.
This line was very interesting to me. It really flipped the game around for me conceptually. Basically, she's saying that what I had been doing, fighting Shinra throughout the whole game, was insignificant compared to the big picture. A real enemy was out there. There were a few things I felt after this. Firstly, I sat there wondering what was the point of anything I was doing the entire game fighting Shinra. But then I realized, I guess it was the experience that me as the player and the characters had. It set them on the path they are on, developed their values, established their goals, and created stronger bonds between them. That is when I realized this game isn't made to massively propel the story. It was never its goal. It is establishing the story and, more importantly, developing the characters and setting a goal. This is really just a prologue, or intro if you will. The real game is going to start with Rebirth. This excited me incredibly. I loved everything up to this point, and to know that this is just an introduction made me realize how much potential there is to come. Not to mention the question I had now. Who the heck is the real enemy if Shinra isn't? And that's why I wanted to talk about this after the Sephiroth scene, because I think what Aerith said was foreshadowing that Sephiroth scene. Based on the context and the end of the game, Sephiroth and perhaps Jenova are the true baddies. But back to the line that Aerith said here, there are clearly things I am not understanding about this, and things that Aerith is not telling us. She knows more than she is saying, and I can't figure out why. Why doesn't she tell her friends to help carry what appears to be a burden? Is something that hard to tell them? Something they wouldn't understand or wouldn't accept? Does she know what the future will hold and what will happen? I can only guess at this point, but Aerith clearly has so many secrets and abilities that I don't understand. Like that weird moment with Marlene in the bar.
Huh?
Or that moment she connects with Red. I can maybe assume that she can connect to the life of people and creatures like flowers, but to what extent does she connect? And what does she do? Red also made this comment about when Aerith reached out to him.
When Aerith reached out to me, I found this knowledge of the Whispers.
He only knew what the Whispers were after she touched them. Aerith is very interesting, and I will look forward to learning more about her in the future games to come.
More than this right here? Talk to me again like you know me.
Barrett! Stop it!
Anyone else really wish Barrett would have dropped him here? I'm not the only one, right? Anyways, I never understood why the gang didn't follow Barrett into the building, when, quite frankly, they were definitely worried that Barrett might kill Shinra and didn't want him to. But whatever. I'll look past the scene because at the end of the day, Sephiroth made whatever they did irrelevant anyways by doing the fans a favor and shish kebab in the Prezi Wezi Shinra Bob, if you will. Or was it not Sephiroth and just an illusion? I'm going to be honest, these weird tattoo guys confuse the heck out of me still. I get that they are Mako poison, but I can't figure out their connection or loyalty to Sephiroth. Or is it loyalty to Jenova? I have no clue. I do not understand how the illusions work per se, but I genuinely hope we don't see that stuff again moving forward. Or at the very least, it gets explained to us so I can understand why it happens and not just an excuse to make Sephiroth appear. It happens so much in this sequence, and it honestly makes me question if we've ever truly saw Sephiroth, or if they were all just illusions. Not a fan of that, but I digress.
You gotta be better than this, if you're gonna play the hero.
This was a really quick but cool scene in my opinion. Before Aerith, Barret, and Tifa left Cloud to fight Rufus on his own, we get a shot of Tifa before she runs away with the others. This was foreshadowing for the moment where she saves him. Not only that, but this is a parallel to Chapter 12 when she goes up after Cloud and the others on the pillar. Tifa couldn't leave Cloud and her friends up there fighting without her. She needed to be up there with them, to help them, and support them. This time on top of the Shinra building was no different. She couldn't just leave Cloud alone. She wanted to be there for him, and ended up running back to him. The parallel between the scene at the pillar and Shinra building doesn't end there though. You might have noticed this exact zoom in on their hands grabbing each other in both instances. At the pillar, Cloud grabbed Tifa, and this time, Tifa grabbed Cloud. The line she says after grabbing him speaks volumes about them, their past and their promise.
You gotta be better than this, if you're gonna play the hero.
At first, I thought the reason she called him a hero was because he let them all run while he fought Rufus in a fairly common hero-type moment. But with more thought, I realized it's more than that. Cloud promised to be her hero when they were kids, and reminded her that in Sector 7. He said he promised he would be there for her, and he would save her. And I would argue he has been there for her as a hero throughout this entire game. From staying with her when she felt trapped with blowing up the reactors, saving her from Corneo's place, defending her and Aerith in the sewers against the Ninja Turtles before going up the ladder, being strong for her in the graveyard, getting her to safety multiple times on the pillar in Chapter 12, and even literally being a shoulder to cry on. He has been there for her through the whole game, and saved her life multiple times. Now, it's Tifa's turn to save him. It's her turn to be the hero that he needs, even if he never asked for it. And let's be honest, he would be too proud and embarrassed to ask for it. If you look back when they blew up Reactor 5 and Cloud is hanging from the side of the walkway, you can see how Tifa reacts in the scene when it looks like the end for Cloud. When Cloud tells Barret to take Tifa and run, you can see Tifa reaching out, wishing she could save Cloud before Barret grabs her and takes her away. If you look closely as Barret turns around, you can see that she starts to hit Barret's back, almost demanding he put her down so she can go back to Cloud. There's even a scene in Integrate where you see Tifa talking with Biggs about what happened to Cloud, and you can tell she's upset by it. Only the reassuring words of the Rock and Foundation himself, Barret, keeps her hopes up that he's alright. I truly think she wishes she could have done more to save him in the past, and she wasn't going to fail him again this time. And she didn't. So now, not only is Cloud her hero, but she is also his. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but it wouldn't feel right not talking about it. The motorcycle portion of this game sucks. We had a motorcycle section earlier in the game, but I figured I would just hit on it during this chapter. It was a cool idea to add something different, but it just didn't really work out for me. I really don't like the controls and the fights weren't very interesting. It doesn't provide much customizability in your play, and it just causes it to feel extremely limiting. I've gotten better since my first playthrough, but it's still not good at all. The boss was a mistake to throw in the mix. It was hard enough dealing with the strong enemies, and then they decided to throw a tanky boss to fight on a bike with an extremely basic moveset. No thank you. I think they probably should have dropped one of the motorcycle portions, honestly. The second motorcycle portion is far more important to the story, as it is escaping the Shinra building, so I would probably say keep that one. But I would say drop the boss, or replace it with Roach. The one praise I want to give the game devs on this though, is the fact that on subsequent playthroughs, you can just skip the motorcycle parts altogether. I definitely did that, and I was very thankful for that on my hard mode playthrough. I think most people don't like the motorcycle bit, so I don't think this is a hot take, but I would be interested to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. The idea that our characters are fighting destiny and gaining freedom is a very cool concept to me. I do want to note something in regards to when we deal with the whispers and destiny throughout the game. It is hard as someone who is coming into the game for the first time to understand the rules of the world, if you will, when the whispers show up and do what they want. It does feel at times that anything goes in this game. The supernatural, whispers teleporting you away, just healing Barrett from death, Mako poison people transforming into tangible Sephiroth, conjure a blade and stab people. It's all a lot. I would say that is one of the only rough parts of the game conceptually. However, from my limited understanding that they essentially use whispers to keep the plot of the original, I think that the supernatural, unexplainable whispers probably make more sense to someone who's played the original. I acknowledge that, so I don't hate it or think too negatively on it. Honestly, I will probably have more appreciation for it after I play the original. The only thing that currently leaves a bad taste in my mouth is the Mako poison people just becoming Sephiroth all the time. Hopefully that either stops being a thing or gets explained. I will say, after seeing the whole Destiny part, it has made me wonder if Cloud's PTSD trips he has are actually Destiny messing with his memories. Or perhaps it's actually a bit of both. Especially anything to do with Zack, since technically he would be dead per the original timeline. Now that the remake has him alive, does he have conflicting memories? One memory of Zack being dead and one where he just disappeared? I'm not sure, but it's no wonder the two paths would mess with his mind. After we defeat Destiny, we have one last fight with the man himself, Sephiroth. There is an absolutely epic cinematic with him that just goes to show you how truly powerful he is. As I said earlier, he never used his full strength against Cloud before and probably barely used a fraction of it. Now it is different. Though I don't believe he's using all of his strength, he's definitely using more of it. You get to see some of his powerful moves that I'm sure is iconic to the Final Fantasy VII fans out there. I recognize a couple from Crisis Core personally, but the ones I didn't recognize were extremely cool. Not to mention the fact that the arena you're fighting in is very epic. The music that plays along with the fight is no different. It's like your ears just got taken on a roller coaster ride. It gets your blood pumping, your energy high, and gets you feeling like you can do anything. Sephiroth's design and weapon is absolutely incredible. I'm also a huge fan of that one wing look as well. I always think that kind of thing looks so cool on characters, and Sephiroth absolutely rocks it. Now with that said, I have something that might be a hot take. I don't know if this is going to make people mad, that's not my wish, but he just seems a bit psycho to me. What I mean by that is he's portrayed to be very obsessed with Jenova and just emotionless to anything. I actually loved the emotionless part. I think that's a pretty cool trait, as well as his inherent calmness. That calmness gives him an eerie vibe to him that I really like a lot. But the psycho part just makes me lose some respect points for him. Especially after playing Crisis Core, he seems super loopy there. You basically see his descent into madness happen in a snap. It is very odd to me, and I don't know how to feel about that. I think what it comes down to is I know little about Jenova and Sephiroth for that matter, so I think the lack of understanding is what makes it harder for me to follow. I guess I'll have to see how he plays out moving into games where he is presumably more prominent, but I'm definitely going to keep an open mind about it because I see how that obsession could make him have a very powerful and passionate drive against our protagonist. Overall though, he's a very cool character. The finale of this game is truly remarkable and sets up a great adventure ahead. I know there's technically DLC and I very briefly touched on that, but I will not be covering that on account of how long this video already is. I had so many thoughts on the story elements and character interactions, but if I touched on them all, this would be a 12-hour long video. I focused mainly on my favorite moments and ones that I had more elaborate thoughts on. Though we got through some items that I want to talk about regarding story and characters, there's still one more thing I want to talk about, and that thing is gameplay. Gameplay is a very important part of video games, so it doesn't feel right to not at least talk about it. I always say the trifecta of video games is gameplay, characters, and story. I briefly talked earlier that from the first battle in the opening of the game, this game made me feel like a badass. The combat feels so smooth, and the slow motion effect when you're selecting commands is an amazing touch. They could have just frozen the screen, but they decided to do something different. I really enjoy that minor detail, and it made it feel more dynamic in combat to me. It kept things moving, but also allowed you time to think and plan, but only so much time. I love that a lot, and definitely appreciated it in the tougher fights like Vice. There was one aspect of gameplay that took me a second to fully understand the best way to use, and that was materia. There are a lot of types of materials that you can equip, and they allow you to create so many playstyles and builds on your characters. I really liked how customizable this made things on top of the accessories and weapon abilities. Which leads me to my next point, the weapons. I loved the weapons and felt like a kid on Christmas every time I got a new one. I was excited to see the abilities that I could gain from my characters, as well as just excited to see the stats and abilities in the upgrade tree for the weapon. Can I just say how amazing that upgrade tree looks? The materia floating in a space-like plane surrounded by materia galaxies of sorts with mineral rocks orbiting is awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed getting my weapon level increased to see what new stuff I unlocked for my weapons. Everything about the weapons was so exciting for me, and I absolutely loved it. I really hope we can see even more weapons in the next game as well, and not just get the same ones we did in this game. I at least hope if they do reuse weapons, we get additional ones on top of it so we can get even more of a selection. I just really love the weapons and upgrade system that they have in this game. I can't think of a game I played that did it quite like this, and that made it feel exceptionally fresh and new to me. Hopefully they do something similar in Rebirth as well with minimal tweaks. The post-game pretty much consists of the Shinra combat simulator and playing the game on hard mode. Starting with hard mode, this feature is unlocked after you clear the game. At first I wasn't too interested in it since I just beat the game. I didn't necessarily want to replay it again, so I didn't touch it for 2 years. When I picked it back up, I was in for a treat. It was definitely challenging and I loved it. Not only that, but I was worried it was going to feel unrewarding, but I was very wrong. Doing side missions and completing story in hard mode gives you weapon level up points, which enable you to further the power of your weapons. And as I just stated previously, I love the weapon upgrade system, so this was great, especially since I didn't even realize my weapons weren't maxed yet. To learn I could power them up more was awesome. That was a very cool way to entice players by actually adding a more tangible reward than just a PlayStation trophy. I realize that may not be worthwhile for every player, but for me, that was pretty awesome. I would still say they could add additional rewards, like more powerful accessories or perhaps hard mode exclusive weapons with unique abilities. I think that would be a better reward to draw more players in. But like I said, I loved it either way. I also personally really enjoyed the other endgame content, which is the Shinra Combat Simulator. This is where your super bosses can be found, and boy is one in particular super. The more difficult fights in the game definitely made me have to formulate strategies, and I love that. People who've been on the channel for a while and join me in streams know I love beating the hardest bosses in games. Like most bosses in the world, if you know how to defeat them, they get easier. And the bosses here were no different. I will say though, Vice definitely was a difficult fight for me that took me quite a while. I tried many strategies across many attempts, but eventually I was able to do it. If any of you out there know what it feels like to beat a hard boss, you can imagine how proud, overjoyed, and accomplished I felt after that. And the reward you get of an accessory that gets your limits faster is well worth it, especially if you still need to play through some of the hard modes like I did. There are so many things I absolutely adore about this game, but the thing that gives me the most nostalgia, attachment, and memories is how it made me feel. I remember emotions at different points of the game and the story. I felt like I was joining a group of friends when Cloud was working with Avalanche. I had so much confusion and awkwardness as my antisocial self when Jessie was flirting with Cloud. I was filled with laughter or joy at the dress scenes in Sector 6. I was deeply saddened and mourned when I saw Jessie and Biggs die. I felt an incredible amount of sorrow when seeing Tifa cry and talk about losing everything. When I finally fought Sephiroth, I felt the adrenaline in my veins and the epic music pounding deep in my head. The game is extremely good at wrapping you in and getting you attached, and that is the number one thing I love about this game so much. I never wanted the story to end, and I am very lucky that it doesn't end here. There are still 2 more games to come, meaning I am really only like a third of the way through it all. Perfect is a difficult word. I don't know that anything in this world can be truly perfect. But what I can say is, my experience with Final Fantasy VII Remake is damn near. I feel intrinsically linked to the characters in a way no game has done before. especially the time of my life I was in and experiences I was going through when I started this game. It was the perfect escape. I have so many memories and feelings from originally playing the game because of it. I smiled, I cried, I yelled, and I laughed. This game means so much to me, and as stupid as it sounds, I would not be the person I am today without it. And that's why Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of the best games ever made.